Hello, everyone, and welcome to another LoLa Podcast. Today, we have Joe Haire, who is the co-founder and creative director at White Red Architecture and Design Studio. These guys are specializing in experience-led offices, hotels, and co-working spaces. He was trained as an architect, and Joe operates at the intersection of architecture and interior design. Whatever that might mean, he'll explain that in a bit. Now, working primarily with existing buildings and clients ranging from global brands, and he's dropped some very heavy names, so we'll come back to that as well, and commercial landlords. So it's mostly down south in London, but is there any more to what they do? Let's find out. Hello, Joe. How you doing?
Hi, Roger. Good to meet you.
So if you can give us a bit of a rundown, like a 60-second pitch. I'm putting you on the spot. Just tell us what you guys do. What do you focus on? Why do you do what you do?
So we do offices, interiors, workplaces typically in central London, but often working with old buildings to bring back workplace, making it far more sort of experiential, far more sort of higher quality, like working with the old character of buildings and creating workplaces that I suppose more resonate more with people. That's what we've been focusing on over the last few years.
That's very interesting, because you told me a bit about your philosophy in the pre-recording, and just how you've swapped it from we're doing something very engineering based, a design based aspect, to thinking about what does that design do to the person that will eventually be walking through those doors. And that is like a whole mentality shift in the way that you design buildings.
That's it. And I think that's not something I expected when we first started. I think there's sort of I think architecture certainly is going through a bit of a transformation at the moment, where we're sort of moving perhaps away from something that's purely technical and something that's kind of like more emotive and interiors focused. And certainly from our perspective, because as we've built this practice and we've sort of focused more and more on existing buildings, which is often where each project now sits, because you can't always knock a building down anymore. You need to work very much with what you've got. We found that actually the building story and everything you're inheriting from the original building is a really, really, really crucial part of that story. And we've realized that actually that's what makes buildings stand out. And I think when we started the business and we were learning about marketing, I certainly learned quite an interesting lesson in how when you build anything, you've got to think about the sort of emotions you're generating at the end of it. You're not just building a building or doing drawings, you're actually creating a series of experiences for people for them to feel a certain way. And so when you put that together with this sort of more focus on reusable buildings, there's this nice opportunity to bring together all the nostalgia, all of the history, all of that energy from the old design or the old moment, and bring that into a new moment, reframe it. And that means that we've moved far more towards interiors, as well as adding stories onto buildings, moving entrances around. We've really sort of majored on interiors because we're realizing that that's actually a huge part of what creates that experience.
And what I find quite interesting in the way that you're describing the work is that you wave your hand and you say that door shouldn't be there because it ruins the experience. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of a builder, just putting their hands on their forehead. There's a big job to do that.
Yeah, there's plenty of that.
But let's go back. Just take us back to the time when you were first starting. What got you personally into this type of thinking, or the work specifically? Where did you start the business? Just take us back in time.
So I used to work for a big firm called AHMM, and my business partner, who's also my best mate at university, Dickie, he was a Foster and Partners. So we both had this sort of big practice mentality, I suppose. And our third partner, Jesus, who joined us shortly afterwards, came from TP Bennett. So like big practices, we always had that sort of mentality, I suppose, before we got started. But when we got started, we didn't have any investment. We didn't have any sort of clients like to sort of take over, because it was just the three of us. And previously, I've been working on Google's headquarters at AHMM, so I wasn't able to take Google with me, immediately. So we had to get started on smaller residential projects. We slowly built up enough money in the bank, working evenings and weekends to pay one salary, and then Dickie went first. Worked a bit harder, got Jesus out, and then I went last, and that was the point where we kind of all three got started in earnest. And we slowly worked towards sort of our business development, towards working with commercial clients, because that was where all of our experience had laid. And we we've been lucky enough since then to work with some quite interesting names. We've worked with Google, we've worked with Virgin on their headquarters in London. We're working with Brunswick at the moment, a big PR firm. We're working also with a lot of landlords in central London, so the Crown Estate and Berkeley Estate. So it's a mixture of landlords, a mixture of sort of office owners that sort of rent them out speculatively. And then we also do quite a bit of hotel interiors as well, which is this sort of blending of the two, workplace and interiors, really blending at the moment.
Okay, so which year was this? How far back are we going?
So 2018 is when I had my notice in and started, and obviously Dickie and Jesus just before that. So I kind of counted from then. That's when it really felt real for me in particular.
It sounds very close to COVID. What happened during that time?
Yeah, well, that was a traumatic period for everybody. Obviously, I think we thought that the game was up. Probably, 18 months in, we had. I remember packing boxes up and just sort of looking across at Dickie and being like, well, that's the end of this, isn't it? And we didn't have an office, obviously, for a while. We were all working out of our bedrooms. I think the team was about 6 at the time, 6 people. But perhaps because we were so sort of focused on the sort of what was traditionally not a main focus for architects, which was this sort of cut and carve interiors work, there was quite a lot of that about, because there's a lot of projects that needed reframing of existing offices, working out what you might do. People that were holding off suddenly had an opportunity to do work. So we're able to pick up quite a lot of sort of reframing of buildings. And that helped, I think, we actually grew during COVID and set us in good stead for when things improved.
Okay. So in terms of the technology you were using before COVID, during COVID, and certainly going to today, what was the ups and downs? What did you change? Did you keep everything you were always using, or have you found new tech to pull in with your team? How did that happen? It's changed a lot. When we first started, it was quite basic. We were very much sort of doing what we knew. So the three of us used to use MicroStation, so drawing software. We used to use SketchUp for our 3D. We used to use V-Ray for our renders, and were quite time consuming. But during that period, we were very focused on being a credible practice. So it was so much focused on that, and Google Docs, just trying to draft all our client care letters and everything. Just everything was kind of being built from scratch. We were very much sticking to what we knew, playing it quite safe. Then I think we had this moment where I remember Twinmotion came along, and as Inkscape as well. But Twinmotion for us was great because it was this gaming software, quick, very responsive. You could drop in a material as you were going around in 3D and you'd see the reflections update, you'd see the water move. It sounds silly, but these things, when you're working on something which, as I kind of said before, is meant to be emotive, you need that feedback. So we really enjoyed that. That was all about creating more realistic 2D renders. And we also did 360s, so we could share 360s on WhatsApp. So we really got our clients engaged as well, because you could export a 360, send it on WhatsApp, and they could open it on their phone and look around it, which meant you often get people sending you messages late at night being like, I've just been looking at this with a glass of wine, and I'm not sure about that detail there that you'd never really thought about. So kind of double-edged, I would say that. But well, it does sound like you pull in your customer to the creative process without them having to do any heavy lifting. So straight away, you're communicating your ideas and design and work with a person that would otherwise not have that opportunity. That's
kind of it. We've realized that the more investment you get, the more emotional investment you get from the whole team, the client, your collaborators, the better the outcome. And that's all tied around this sort of shared story, if you like, that everyone's kind of co-authoring, and our job is to hold that. So tools like that, where you can really get people genuinely excited and showing their friends, these are the big moments where you kind of onto something, where what we're doing, giving people that opportunity. I think we've realized is an important part of the process. That led us to, I suppose, right up to present day. We then started using Mental Canvas, which is for hand drawing. You can do 3D hand drawing, so you can draw a scene like Disney would, and you can fly through it to the next page. So this was us realizing that actually, if we can do nice emotive 2D, can we do something that's 3D and actually more focused on moments in the day, which led us onto video with Twinmotion as well. So trying to make sort of sound, speech bubbles, the rain falling to illustrate when you're going inside. And then up to the present day, it's just been AI non-stop for the last however long, but I'm just loving how intuitive, how it allows you to take what is your intuition as to what the design should be, and test those ideas very quickly. So it should feel like this. Well, you can create that many different ways. And before we do one render and it would take ages. Now I can run something through Midjourney many times. I can cut and carve that, put it into Photoshop, Frankenstein the images together, get a good quality image that communicates something far closer to what I had in mind. And it also allows others to respond and you to incorporate that feedback quicker. So I'm finding that this moment we're in right now is this almost like the most perfect expression as it currently stands for what we use technology for, which is all about getting closer between how an idea is felt, shared, and I suppose tested collaboratively.
So it's almost like you pull out your clay, your putty, and you just make your quick draft there and then. And then you think, no,
exactly.
I don't like that bit, and you mess with it, and then you bring someone else in, and they can mess with it as well.
That's it. Exactly. It's so much more malleable, so less perfect, and yet so much more sort of emotive. And you're all sharing something far more and feeling it far more than you were before.
Well, that's very interesting, because when I was talking to other guests on the show, they came in with the approach, when it came to AI in the creative world, they came with the approach that it makes you a lot more lazy sometimes, and there is people that are less qualified to produce a good result, to get a good enough result to try and get away with it. So it reduces the industry's overall quality. But what you're saying is that you can quickly and dirty create something to convey ideas, so that everyone involved can then better communicate that idea and collaborate to work on it.
That's right. I personally, I think that you can never do in design, you can never do the job 100%. There's always further. It's infinite. You can always make someone feel something more. You can always have something that's more aligned. There's always a different experience you could create. So there is no end to this. And so if AI is sort of speeding this up exponentially, for me, that's quite exciting.
Okay, very interesting. So what do you see in terms of your industry today? How does the workflow start? Where does it get into this collaborative process? How often do you get the feedback from the customers? And when it comes to the actual implementation of it, do you get involved at all, or do you pass over the work and you allow someone else to deal with that?
No, we do. So we do all of that, and that's probably the biggest thing. The backbone through all of this, which I mentioned, we started with MicroStation at the beginning, but actually that was only very short-lived. We started using Revit and BIM very early in the process. BIM has been the backbone for all of this, because ultimately that's the asset at the end. Well, the building is obviously ultimately is the final thing, but the BIM model and the quality of that, I think throughout everything I've just said, the big thing that we've always been trying to work on as well is to reduce the gap between BIM and this sort of emotional sort of noise at one end, and trying to make that the quality of the BIM model closer and closer and closer, more reactive and more in line with, because, you know, with the best will in the world, you're trying and your sort of ideas are flowing, the BIM model can't keep up, but there are smarter ways of working always. So for us, focusing on that, trying to get a better workflow where this all mixes and the BIM model is kind of more and more live and accurate is probably one of the biggest things that we need to improve, and the biggest driver of, you know, quality when it comes to the drawing output that we make, and then the collaboration with the contractor.
So would you say you pick up these ideas that you're working on and keep molding on them, and you throw some away and you start again, and then whatever seems to work, you just detach it and go to the backbone and incorporate it and then move on?
Yeah, and I just feel like there's a more intuitive way of doing it than that. But yes, that's how it currently works. I mean, we'll just take this is where we are. This is the asset. This is the phase where we agreed, the client, everyone, the cost, everything's fixed at that point, and then we start to experiment with the edges. That's always happened. What I'd like to do is bring that point and that point closer together, so that we're not kind of coming back there and Christ, we need to update this whole thing now, because I think that it's a distraction away from the quality that I suppose we could be doing.
Yeah, it does. It just raises more questions in my mind now about the process, because I'm thinking from what you said at the beginning, you start with buildings that are existing, but that doesn't always mean that you've got the plans for the original building or that they are accurate to the building that you have today. So how do you get the real world into a digital form? How do you work it to get to where you want to be? How do you then translate the digital that you've created back into the real world? It's like a full circle, isn't it?
No, that's absolutely. And it's a massive thing for us, because obviously we're working with these often listed buildings. You're often finding things inside that you didn't know. We always do a 3D BIM survey, so we have an accurate model. That's always quite a fundamental. It's expensive, but it's an important asset, because.
But how do you do it? What's the technology?
You bring people in who scan. They scan with point cloud the whole thing, and they build a model from that. So that's accurate. But often the ceilings are in, so you can't see the structure. Often there's parts of the building you can't get to, and then when you start working on it, you take a panel away and you realize that the structure isn't exactly what you thought it was. So that is like a very constant live feedback. But again, on AI, take a photograph now, a good photograph, and straighten it in Photoshop. You can use that as a skeleton to stitch using whichever, whatever design you're kind of trying to overlay. You can use existing material. So if you've got, for example, a room with a load of old original moldings. We're doing a project in Mayfair at the moment, just off Berkeley Square, which has got all of this original beautiful moldings for the ceiling and the architraves and everything. We don't want to lose that, but to model all of that would be ridiculous. So we use a beautiful photograph of it, and we will stitch in the assets we're creating, the parts we need to model, but we will use AI over the top of what's already there to imagine what it'd be like if we painted that, if we removed that, if we changed the finish. So we're using photographs far more because of what AI is allowing us to do alongside a BIM scan.
Okay, so you do the scan, and that provides you with a 3D representation of the scan that is created, but you also take stills images, which then you can play with the coloring and the textures and whatever to get ideas. Once you've got that scan, do you put that straight into the backbone, or do you recreate it then by stripping all the artifacts and stuff? No,
you take that model, which is a existing model, and everything is tagged as existing. So if you've got a door, it's an existing door. It's all part of the phase. And you then create a demolition phase. So you can tag each part that needs to be removed. Obviously that develops as time goes on. Before you get to the strip out, that will form the strip out information. So if a wall's coming out, it gets tagged. And as a result, that will show up as red for the contractor to remove. But it also means that in the proposal, that element of the model disappears and you can replace it with whatever you need or leave it out. So it's all about keeping the information clean.
This brings me back to that thing we were saying before. I can see where it comes from, where you say that thing just needs to go and you just wave your hand and you go.
You want it to go. Yeah, exactly. I want that. That's what I want.
Oh, wow. And then from there, you do the design and then you get to implementation. How do you transfer that information to someone that's actually going to do the work? Or do you guys go out as well? Or do you have like teams that you work together with?
So the different ways of procuring the construction work. There's the traditional way where it's called traditional, but it means basically we do drawings as we would typically do for everything. We will detail everything, and that's kind of like, that's the full set of information you need to build it. I mean, not the screws, but like down to pretty much everything. So the type of door, the architrave, the windows in the door, the handle, position of the handle, all that sort of stuff. We draw it all. And that then a contractor takes all of that, and then they literally just build it all, they price it, and then build it. And any changes come through, and we redraw them, and they retender. Then there's design and build, where they will take the intent that could be from earlier in the process, and then they will kind of finish the design off. So that's the other kind of way of doing it. But it always is going to involve someone drawing the detail at some point, whether it's the contractor's designer or the architect.
Okay, so in terms of the interior of the building, I guess that's the enclosed, constrained, you've got the limits, you know where you're working towards. What happens to the exterior? Because you can't just go and do a 3D scan of a skyscraper, can you?
No, no, not a skyscraper. No, that's where you're going to rely on the original model. Hopefully you've got a BIM model of that. If you don't, then yeah, it's gonna need its own internal survey. You can 3D scan the inside, or you're gonna have to make up the outside. Okay. But yeah, the exterior. If it's a 4-story building in, as I say, for example, this one in Mayfair, you scan it. They scan the entire exterior as well, so you can get the 3D of all of that, the fan lights and the type of window and everything, all the detail. Okay, so there is a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. Exactly.
Okay.
Drones.
Drones, yeah. I mean, I've just recently gotten my my first proper 4K drone, and I've taken it out twice. And every time I look at it, I'm like, I need to go out again, because you always think about other things you can do with it. But for me, it's just like a little toy, isn't it? But there's people that use this for work, and I have seen this 3D rendering or scanning that they do of like ancient architecture that you shouldn't touch, but you do want to scan to get into some kind of model. Recently, I've had an interview with, I can't remember the name, but what he works on, he is recreating the American Revolution with Ubisoft and some actual like councils of the area down in the US somewhere. And what the way they're doing it is they're pretty much picking up a lot of artifacts and assets from Assassin's Creed, because they have them ready to go from Ubisoft. And then they're using a 3D scanning and geolocation positioning technology from Pokemon Go, of all places. And they're putting the two together to attempt to create a realistic recreation in virtual space in the actual location. I'm thinking that's such a cool concept. It's like everything
absolutely.
Here, but in live motion whilst you're playing back, and possibly even having, you know, feedback on the history. So that is the world we're living in. That is where it's going.
I'd love that. I'd love that for our projects. Well, this again, so the same project. Winston Churchill, I think, grew up in it as a small child. So could recreate that moment of him running around and be like, "Look, you can have this."
It's Churchill. He's 3 foot tall, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He still has a cigar in his mouth.
Exactly.
So going forward, then in the future, what kind of technologies are you seeing coming up? What kind of opportunities can you just grab from now and move into? Or do you see any dangers in the way that you're working and the way that you will handle the next 5 years?
I think that architecture is in a very strange place where it's quite an old industry. I think there's been many parts of it that I think have been struggling for a while, and the AI element is just really speeding that up. I think I always come back to the same point. I go on and on about this, about the impact that reading about marketing had on me. But I read one book in particular, Seth Godin, This is Marketing. And it's just sort of the fundamentals of like any marketing, any product. You ultimately have to focus on the experience, the emotions that come out of the product. But very few people who work in making those products, no matter what you're doing, if you're an accountant, if you create software, if you are on a construction site, are thinking in that way, because obviously you're doing the technical challenge in front of you. But I feel like architecture is no different. It's exactly the same thing. And when we realize that it's not the task that perhaps you thought you were signing up for originally, it's not like this sort of protected thing, that it is actually all about facilitating a better sort of outcome through the built environment, spaces that people want to be in, that enjoy, that enhance their quality of life. Then you can think, well, actually, there's many different ways of doing that. And that makes me feel that if we're more entrepreneurial, which is where I feel all of the AI is kind of pushing us all, we need to be more entrepreneurial, we need to be more, what is the ultimate problem we're trying to solve here, rather than focusing on what's right in front of us. I think that's where all this technology is good. This is great. As long as you've got command over where you're trying to go, the difference you want to see, it's fine. The problem comes, and as you say, well, you know what I worry about when people don't have that mindset and they're quite protectionist on what they're doing, and they start putting up whatever barriers they can to prevent change, which is totally understandable. But I just see that's where the sort of the danger lies. So as I say, for me, what that means, and for us, what that means is a better flow of intuition down onto paper. Essentially, it's all about judgment. We develop judgment through working with this. That's our asset. We create value by applying our judgment. That's what clients pay us for. And so technology is speeding that up. AI it's all about that for me. But I'm just finding, for example, ChatGPT as an example, or any software you can use to flow ideas in and get perspective on those, helping you with empathy, and allowing you to connect more deeply with people. There's no end to how high I feel we can go with that. So in terms of a specific product, I'm not sure, but that for me is kind of the philosophy going forward.
Okay, well, from what you're describing there, it's almost like I can pick 3 separate types of people. The people that don't want the change because they're established well and they like the way things are now, and they just want to slow down the change because they either see a danger or they want to protect their own benefits. Yeah. There is the people that are actually going through the change with this entrepreneurial mind, with a very clean and clear purpose in why they're doing what they're doing. And they are the ones that are getting the most benefit out of it, because they're not getting lost by the tool, but the tool is actually enabling them to do better. And then you've got the completely other side of the coin, which is the people that use it without any consideration, and they use these kind of tools and they just fire out a lot of low grade, no quality.
Generic.
Exactly. That actually just ruins the industry in the fact that they keep releasing. Yeah, they just bring the average down because there's no good things going out. So that might even become a positive though, because there's so much.
I think so.
that the good stuff just shines when it comes to it.
Yeah, well, it's ultimately it's judgment. You can't really replace it. You have experience in this. You've actually sat there and experienced the doubt of not being able to hit the payroll, or to whatever it is risk you're taking, or a client being angry with you, or misunderstanding something. Those things form your judgment. The judgment is the thing that people are genuinely employing you for. That stuff you can't fake, you can't make it, you can't create a generic post about. You need to have lived it, and you've got to interpret it and convert those into genuine lessons that you can pass on.
So that's the reason you called it, you need to be entrepreneurial about the way you use these tools, because you need to have that consideration. You need to have the insider information of how you use it and why you're using it the way you are.
Yeah, and kind of where you're trying to get to. I think so.
Amazing. Okay, so do you have any final words that you want to leave people with right before we jump off? It's a second time.
That's a big one. It's a lot of pressure. I don't know. No, I quite.
Well, the truth is that it's all about what your ethos is going to be within the work that you do. And I guess you've already described it quite well in the fact that it's not necessarily the art of what you're doing, but it's the purpose behind it. So when you're thinking about the marketing side of building a building, you're actually considering the person that this is going to be for, the people that are going to go through those doors. If you're talking about co-working spaces, there might be hundreds, if not thousands of people going through that space on a daily basis. And if that's the case, what are they feeling going through the door? How well can they operate within the space that they were given? And when they leave, are they going to be inspired to come back and do it again? And those are those questions that you're trying to embed into your
life. And going to a full circle to go back to marketing, but and your point about the drone, we're obviously doing marketing because we're running a business, we need to market. But the really interesting thing about recording the content that we need to record to do the marketing is that we're realizing we're creating a better quality product. So if we video the process, for example, and talk about the process of ripping down a wall and finding this old structure we didn't expect to see, and then some of that structure is present in the final interior, that makes a much stronger connection between the people that use that building and the interior themselves. If there's content out about it, if the building, you think about the building, not just there's a moment in time that this is where I go to work, but you've seen videos about how that building was made, it changes how you feel about it. So in terms of fostering better connection, I think that that's a massive thing that we can be doing. So it's kind of like this full circle, better feedback loop with your marketing process and how it inputs on your product. And
those are the exact final words that we needed for this podcast. Thank you very much, Joe. You've been amazing. We'll post this out there, and I'm sure there's going to be so much insight to be taken for the audience. Thank you very much for taking the time to be on the.
Very much good to speak to you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.